Nice.
It is.
Tell us about it. Just you've got 1 minute to.
Well, I'm in the middle of a valley.
Art can be understood as a special case of entanglement, presenting a knot-like figure that sets it apart from other structures of communication. That's the basic premise. Vanda, you read.
The relationship between memory, vision, and imagination pertain to the formation and deformation of images, but also to the three modes of figuring time: past, present, and future. This in turn occasions the complex, entangled relationship of time and the image.
Continue.
Why then entanglement as a figure, and what is implicated by it? There is an ordinary sense to it as a concept, that is, being caught up into something that leads either to chaos or to complexity. Then there is a less familiar figure that derives from quantum physics, postulating a situation that when pairs or groups of particles are generated, then each of them cannot exist independently of the other, even as in a state of spatial separation. Both situations exist as states of co-extensivity. Nan Golding putting on her makeup, 1992. The subject never becomes available to itself because it cannot present to itself, and thus it is opaque to its own gaze. In turn, the artwork is a condition of being a subject-object as it cannot present a condition of knowability. The question of unknowability is a question of entanglement of vision, memory, and imagination.
The image of Nan Gold in a self-portrait.
Art is what cannot be anticipated. Art comes to presence on its own limit, and as this limit. Marta Hekila. Paul Klee, Angelus Novus, 1920.
So we shift to Sharon Reed.
It is not the case that things past shed their light on present things, not that present things shed their light on things past, but the image is that moment where the past enters like a lightning bolt into the constellation with the now. In other words, image is dialectics in a standstill. Walter Benjamin.
Francesca Woodman, Untitled, from 77 to 78. Continue, Sharon.
In George Didi Huberman's Confronting Images, the image itself is always rend. That is subject to inclusion, break, interruption, because it contains within its boundary that which cannot be seen or known in its entirety. That is there is a flaw within the logic that conceives of the totality that flows before it. The image is not a figured figure, but only the figuring figure that enables the visible to occur. For Didi Huberman, the world of images does not reject the world of logic, but it plays with it, offers itself there as the power of the negative. It is impossible to conceive of the image without the work of the negative, knowing how to remain in a dilemma between knowing and seeing in order to smash the box of representation. And the poet Rilke said, desires are memories from our future.
The photograph by Dedo Mariama of a billboard image.
She said to me that this future is the secret of the present. No one has lived in the past, and no one will live in the future.
This is from the film Alphaville from 1963, which is one of the great science fiction films, which is a computer runs the whole of society, Alpha 60. And it eliminates temporality. Everything lives in the present.
Sometimes paintings are a mystery that appear to solicit close or complex attention. There is a sensation of displacement or attention adrift in this work by Velázquez.
There's Diego Velázquez, The Lady with the Fan, from 1638 to 39. It's not known who the subject is. Continue, Sharon.
He
That's
would,
what.
he would regularly visit the Wallace collection to see The Lady with a Fan by Diego Velázquez. The name of the sitter was not recorded, or at least has been erased from historical record, so remains a source of considerable speculation. Not that he was interested in such matters. Instead, he would look intently at the left gloved hand because he felt that it was the meeting point between fetishism and beauty. The hand seemed both to be subject to manner, a mannerism, but also emancipated from this at the same time. Perhaps this state of in-between is close to the condition of the uncanny, but whatever it was a source of fascination, as words appear to evade this object of attention, closer indeed to an activity of absence.
Who's next? Lester.
Entanglement of the image, gesture, and ethics, with the feeling in turn of not really reaching a resolution in the attempt to read the image or to resolve what it is. Man Ray, Dora Maar, 1936. In Commerel, or On Gesture, Agamben states, if speech is originary gesture, then what is at issue in gesture is not so much a pre-linguistic content as, so to speak, the other side of language, the muteness inherent in humankind's very capacity for language, its speechless dwelling in language, and the more human beings have language, the stronger the unsayable weighs them down. Antoine Artaud. Levinas developed the idea that art is neither eternal nor outside of time, but that it endures on the hither side of time, in a region he describes as the meanwhile, an interval between neither and nor. Art for him disengages time from its passing. Joseph Beuys, How to Explain Paintings to a Dead Hare, 1965. Just imagine lecturing to a dead hare in order to explain paintings. Benjamin wrote on imagination in the following manner. The German language possesses no native term to describe the forms, Gestalten, of the imagination. Only the word manifestation may in one specific sense be regarded as such. And in fact, imagination has nothing to do with forms or formations. It does indeed take its manifestations from them, but the connection between them and the imagination is so far from being inexorable that we might rather describe the manifestations of the imagination as the deformation of what has been formed. He also stated that imagination is the genius of forgetting, alongside having the power of deformation. Deformation opens the artwork to the possession of a critical mode of violence that might serve to rupture or shatter the sense held in place by tradition. Andy Warhol. Warhol displays his wounded body after being shot. Scar tissue is like a form of memory written on the body. but he claimed, I have no memory. Every day is a new day because I don't remember the day before. Every minute is like the first minute of my life. Warhol was emblematic of contemporary time, perverse and sharp at the same time. On Golub.
Next reader.
The painter Leon Golub declared this, now is the time for the dogs. Golub was how do you even say that? Advocating a fracturing of time, undeclared wars, realms immersed in shadow, and of a world that does not add up.
He did his enormous tarpaulin paintings in the 1980s. They're unstretched, they're raw tarpaulins. And he would paint and then scrape the paint off, so it has this kind of almost an unpainterly feeling to it. You get the feeling of the scraping of the image. But it's sort of the secret underground wars which blighted Latin American politics for years. This is by Dado Mariama, Stray Dog.
A dog looks back as he is being shot by the camera. For a moment, he arrests the space in which he is standing. Moriyama portrays harsh realities of living, hard-grained and blurry, decentered and out of focus, burning and vaporous, discordant and fast, but ultimately much more to do with the meeting point of memory and history as opposed to memory and imagination. At times, his images appear to be on the edge of their own inward path towards disintegration or oblivion, phantoms of reality as much as reality itself. A human being is nothing more than a life spent attentively passing through an assemblage of countless scenes. You can say life is transitory and leave it at that. But when I wonder where on earth a certain scene from a certain time and a certain period disappeared to, for me that is not sentimentality, but rather a feeling closer to irritation. All people lose their scenes one after another. Another way of expressing this is to call it an exasperation with time. Time is not something that comes pressing down on each of us. Recalling scenes that are being lost is simultaneously presaging scenes of the death that is to come. Then what is the transcendental nature of memory? I don't understand this well, but for example, when people fear darkness, or when they stand transfixed by the horizon at the seashore, the only thing that I can imagine is that people are sympathizing with every cell of their body with a distant memory of something. Whether this is an accumulation of memories carried along for an astounding length of time since antiquity by the biological cells themselves, or a system of memories cultivated over a long period of time by history of humans and the world, or something else entirely is beyond my interpretation. But whatever it is, I have the feeling that it is accompanied by a certain dread.
There is Shri Sugimoto.
The concept of time applies. I'm trying to recreate the imaginative visions of the architecture before the architect built the building, so I can trace back to the original vision from the finished product. What is it that can connect to remote historical moments? The time of Giotto with the time of Matisse, something out of the blue, a flash across time, or a passion for the image. Historical time, not just as a sequence of straight lines, but ruptures, discontinuities, and leaps that open out of the possibilities of reconfiguration.
This is the Arena Chapel in Padua. This was painted just. You can only get to see it for 20 minutes. Everyone is timed entrance and exit. So you get just an opportunity to absorb the blueness, the lapis blue.
Beautiful.
It was constructed by a moneylender who late in life became guilty of all the money he'd made from citizens. But it's a fantastic sensation walking into that space. One of the great frescoes of Italian art. Someone else read.
Someone else read.
Henri Matisse visited the Arena or Scrovegni Chapel, 1305, in Padua to witness firsthand the fresco paintings of Giotto. It was in 1907 when this occurred, and it was clear that Matisse was moved deeply by the experience. In 1908, he painted The Desert, Harmony in Red, the Red Room. Was this important modernist painting, which had such a profound effect on the way the figure and ground relationships started to be reconfigured, an imaginative outcome of seeing the whole space drenched within the intensity of a single dominant color? What was it that Matisse was seeing in Giotto, if not the majesty of a vision rendered visible with the purity of means? Perhaps it was a painter attending to the task entertaining within the secrets of the excess, a sense of excess arriving out of a painting as its own project, the passion of the artist.
That's the Matisse painting.
Walter Benjamin's last text, These on the Philosophy of History, 1940, has served as an epitaph of his thought. Written as a densely formulated series of aphoristic meditations on time and history, we're presented with a series of contesting images held within a mood of refrain, even a form of slow motion perhaps, in the light of impending catastrophe. Language and a sense of loss appear to coalesce within this text. Dream, shock, memory, reverie mingle with huge figures of thought. The rise of Nazism, the stultifications within Marxist movements, the shadows of war creating an ambiguous space of reception within the space of writing. Close perhaps to Hegel's gallery of pictures evoked in the phenomenology of spirit. Whereas time for Hegel is clearly equated with history, Benjamin offers a different possibility of the image itself, standing for history in ways that serve also to coalesce time and image. It is in this text that Benjamin develops one of the most commented upon passages in all of his work in the form of a mediation on Paul Klee's painting Angelus Novus, which he had personally owned. In Benjamin's text, the image of the angel is connected to the idea of happiness within the setting of the text, which is melancholic. For Benjamin, our image of happiness is indissolubly bound up with the image of redemption. The angel, as a figure, is the link between origin and ending. The angel is an embodiment of a dialectical image that flashes before us. The past can be seized as only an image which flashes up at the instant when it can be recognized and is no longer seen again. The dialectical image is both inside and outside of time, and inside and outside of time that is able to reveal an afterlife of experience as a form of co-presence of time. This way of drawing together a multi-directional temporality is what Benjamin termed a constellation through which contradictions might be intensified. Because cinema has its center in the gesture and not in the image, it belongs essentially to the realm of ethics and politics and not simply to that of aesthetics. Giorgio Agamben.
This is still from Le Jetée by Chris Marker, early 60s or mid 60s.
In the film, in the film Leggett, 1962, by Chris Marker, a man who has become a prisoner in the aftermath of World War III is called upon to time travel into the future by virtue of his vivid relationship to memory. It can be claimed that on an abstract plane, it is a film about memory and history, as well as the image and time, relationships which are intensified by the reality of the film consisting or being constructed out of still image, except in one brief interval of eye movement early in the film. It is stated that nothing sorts out memories from ordinary moments. Later on, they do claim remembrance when they show their scars. The face he had seen was to be the only peacetime image to survive the war. Had he really seen it, or had he invented that tender moment to pop up? The victors conducted experiments to discover subjects with a powerful memory in order to ascertain if it would be possible to call past and future to the rescue of the present. There was a feeling of dread circulating in the film, a dread of being caught within the web of time, unable to escape the paradoxes contained within it. The final paradox embedded in the film is the character witnessing the moment of his own death, a pure image of finality. Just as the subject is not a self-seeing agency, blindness then is embedded in the very persistence of the film toward its interruption.
Still from the film. The prison guards who conduct the experiment.
The combat necklace he wore at the start of the war that is yet to come. He realized there was no escape from time.
These are the messengers from outer space who he gains contact with, and he declines to go with them into outer space. Instead, he stays on Earth because he's attached to the image that he's trying to find, the image of peacetime.
You dream of one thing, but you get quite another.
Still from Stalker by Tarkovsky. One more.
Okay. In Andrei Tarkovsky's film Stalker, 1978, there's a scene in the zone where Stalker is resting alone, and it is as though he enters a dreamscape in which all the fragments of civilization are embedded within shallow water. There is no distinct narrative within the sequence, just the sense of a warp in time that allows relations between the objects to occur outside of their worldly context. A montage without cuts that occasions or echoes with the notion of a field of non-arrival. What Tarkovsky preserved within these echoes, folded in a given field of attention, is a distinction of rhythm governed by the search for time that was articulated as sculpting in time. The zone disarticulates the relationship of mind and nature, thereby opening perception to a loss of common sense. Nothing is as it appears, and it is as though the psyches of the characters start to morph into new configurations of becoming other. They walk or drift within the strange, and they present in turn their exposure of feelings that arise within this strangeness. The zone is like the outside of modernity, not as corrective or as active negation or even conceptual beyond, but rather as it is ungraspable and immobile otherness, excuse me.
Still from Stalker, where he has a dream. It's one of the great passages, one of the great montage passages in the history of cinema.
Oh God, for me, it is prison everywhere. The zone is a very complex maze of traps.
So the next person, Clara.
A stream of images, interlocking and recombining, always mutating in search of the conjunction of time and image. A zone, a thinking planet, matter and memory spliced into a continuum. Discontinuity, nothing as it appears, as stable identities are dissolved.
This is still from Solaris. This is Solaris itself, which is a thinking ocean. Like a giant brain on a planetary level. Again, it's still from Solaris.
To conceive of history is also to introduce the possibility of its end. Godard traces the history of cinema from the standpoint of its process of coming to an end. Art is like fire, born from what it burns. Godard's Histoire du cinéma, which existed both as a 4.5-hour TV production and in a 4-part book, offers an analysis of both cinema and art. His methodology for this project is close to Walter Benjamin's The Arcades Project and the thesis on the philosophy of history. In many respects, this is a melancholic work on the increasing obsolescence of art cinema, which is placed within the lost conditions of an era. It is the memory body of modernist cinema set to work in the margins of excess left over from the process of categorizing of historical or national passage. Godard appropriates for this task modernism's most important tropes of remembrance from Baudelaire's correspondence to Proust's intermittences, Benjamin's historist's angel, and Heidegger's Andenken des Denken. This is an important attempt to reevaluate the use of montage in time consciousness in the 20th century that incorporates practices drawn from critical theory, practices of montage, and historical thought made manifest. Soon after to mask the memory. Jean-Luc Godard states that montage is the figuring of surprise. Montage is the weave of image, voice, sound, and gesture within a process of discontinuous arrest.
This is a still between an Italian image from 50s cinema with a Botticelli fresco.
If direction is a look, montage is a heartbeat. To foresee is the characteristic of both. For what one seeks to foresee in space, the other seeks in time. Neither an art nor a technique, a mystery. For Godard, television makes forgetting while cinema made memories. Art stays close to the figure of aporia, or withdrawal that precedes it, as a testimony to the complex play of the subject-time image. Each and every play and potential striation, sublate, raise up, annul, preserve in different combinations or singularities one another in this play. A story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order.
Next person to read. Anya.
Gilles Deleuze writes on cinema from the standpoint of the image in two ways: through movement and through time. Images following Bergson are mobile sections of duration. The crystal image maintains the closest link to the virtual, mainly in the form of a link between the past and the present, or the virtual or the actual.
These are all stills from the history of cinema.
What constitutes the crystal image is the most fundamental operation of time, since the past is constituted not after the present that it has, but at the same time, time has to split itself in two at each moment as present and past, which differ from each other in nature, or what amounts to the same thing. It has to split the present into two heterogeneous directions, one of which is launched towards the future, while the other falls towards the past. Time consists of this split, and it is time that we see in the crystal. Charles Deleuze.
Again, Godard's history of cinema.
The image is not a closed field of knowledge. It is a whirling, centrifugal field. It is not a field of knowledge like any other. It is a movement demanding all the anthropological aspects of being and time. Georges Didi Huberman. John Akomfro's film installation, Vertigo Sea, 2015, fuses together images of the slave trade, whaling migration with the idea of the yet to come.
This is still from the film. Another still image. Another still image.
Sometimes the things that serve to attract are strange. Why a whale? Or even more extreme, a killer whale? How are such attractions and fascinations formed? A shared memory, a dream perhaps, or a half-forgotten children's book. Anyway, it is submerged, both in the origin and the image. In this way, it is both there, but also lurking on the edge of disappearance, as in a glimpse of the eye. In this respect, assuming a relationship to the spectacle that patrols the boundary between the real and a phantom. This is where the threat lies. This patrolling of a dangerous boundary, rendered in shades of grey. The grey signifies both the deep and the remote. It is the registration of the indistinct grey killer whale. Killer grey whale in passing by, glimpsed killer, a grey killer glimpsed in the half-light on the edge on this world, in the deep of this world, passing from this world. The painting is also fixed, definite, even still, and yet it trembles on its own edge, a still painting, but still a painting that trembles. Miho Sato Killawell.
Next.
Yeah.
Who's next? We'll return to Vanda.
If beauty might stand for a coextensive mode of entanglement that occasions the suspension of the subject, then the sublime would stand for an entanglement that fractures the subject, creating a decentering of it in the process. If beauty causes absorption into, then the sublime might be described as a leap out of, or even an elevation from, and in this it is always attached to movement. Furthermore, a movement that doubles back over itself, becoming a presentation of such a capacity or seizure. Then we have the figure of abjection, which is somewhere between object and subject, and this implies a falling into. Whether beauty, sublimity, or abjection, we are given over to a subject affected by something that creates a movement or shift. The discourse of the aesthetic realm and freedom is possible because both are rooted within a common prediscursive origin. This is the most elegant of all entanglements. The work of Esther Teichmann takes into places of darkness, caves, swamps, remote seas, shadowy rooms, all spaces that appear to congeal time. The question in circulation is, are these both the first and the last places? Are these both the first and the last places where the desire for another light stirs? Where the desire for another light stirs? Something is in the air, like a strange vapor that cannot be named.
That's the Teichmann photograph.
Untitled From Heavy the Sea too. Can't read it all because there's something over it. But anyway, the codes of modernity are adrift within networks of technologies, in oceans of images and plastic, all struggling to find anchor, layers upon layers of information, concrete sounds and messages held in place by pollution like substances, people on the move without signage, acres of loneliness spread across cities, sugar-coated bombs and mines made sugar, virus wars, implosions, densities of nonsense, highways of despair leading nowhere, painkillers and pain fillers, all without a moment's pause. What to do, how to think. A demented stuttering instead, perhaps a return to basics, a working out or a working through, in the light of a naked question, not thinking straight, naked and knotted, skipping with thought, sinking into a pit, being spat out, being still just alive, pulsing and perhaps repulsing, awakened to dream, dream walking, talking, making, on the move, flying, spinning, being moved by things. Nothing stops, shuddering but never stopping, desperate to remember, is not modernity but the delicate threads of memory that we have lost within the circularity of contemporary time.
That's the Teichmann photograph.
In theorizing the unconscious, Felix Guattari poses the difference between the idea of the unconscious as a crystallization of the past or as congealed in institutional discourse within an unconscious turned towards the future whose screen would be none other than the possible itself. For Guattari, such a difference is born out of thinking time against the grain, to imagine that what came after can modify what was before. In order to explore new or possible interactions of the level of temporality, abstract machines are assembled in order to traverse various levels of reality. In the process, stratifications are both established and demolished in order that causalities will no longer function in a single direction.
That's the Teichmann again.
What is to come and how to see what is coming? Are we touched by something as opposed to knowing something? Is the work of artists to explore the terrain between the measurable certainties and immeasurability? In the words of Catherine Malibu, the future is also a promise that there are forms of life which must be invented. This power of invention, touched by what is not yet seen, articulates a form of desire we call art. Its voice is distinct and its production is difference. He said to her that there is a man who has travelled the world, arid deserts, great oceans, mountains, and then dwelling in fertile and barren plains alike. In his travels, he learnt and forgot so many things, but of all the things he had learnt, the most esoteric was the art of the symbolic winds. This was like a healing practice, which consisted of lying next to a person and blowing air into their ears in ways that would simulate memories of the various places. So, blowing in the ear might give rise to the feeling of the air in the Sahara, next the breeze of the Mekong, and so on. As these winds started to circulate, then images would start to arise within the other, and eventually their very being was infused with a feeling of residing within the extent of this earth. Once this process of blowing was complete, then it constituted a form of symbolic pregnancy related to dwelling on this earth. Indeed, the direction of the future is only there in order to elude us. Atai. Should I continue?
This last one, I think it is.
I was drifting, simply drifting, not knowing which way to face. It was difficult to separate inside from outside. So I resolved to explore this space of entangled not knowing. A question starts to jut out. What is the relationship between worlds? The human, non-human, inhuman, post-human, pre-human, so many worlds to overwhelm sense. But what if, for a moment, we could glean just a fragmentary grasp of such a circulation? What then?
So entanglement, not a linear plot of multiplicity of waves and winds and not a knowledge, way of being with or attending to the image and temporality.
I was really drawn to the idea of unknowability being represented by the temporal quality of the image, and even in the present, that you can't see yourself as you are ever in the present, or the subject can never figure themselves in time.
Where do we go from there?
The eternal emptiness. I don't know. It causes a bit of a
Quandary.
a beautiful frisson, right? That we speak a lot about seeking the moment or being present in the moment, but to do that is to not observe oneself. And so oneself could only be a projection into the future or a memory. And that's a fascinating liberation, I think.
I like that, the Rilke quote about memories of the future. They reverses the relationship between the future and memory, and imagination in the future and memory in the past. He reverses it. Normally, imagination is given a faculty of projecting into the future, the not known, whereas memory is past, and he reverses it.
I love the notion too of time splitting, this idea that you're in the moment and that's all we really ever have. This idea, I almost feel this moment where time is splitting off toward the past and toward the future, but it's not actually in either of those places. It's actually always rooted in the moment that we're in. It's a really powerful notion.
And it also really, I've really picked up on that too. It gives you this sense of falling, of continuous falling, within this division of that moment. It's fantastic.
It gives me a sensation of floating, not falling. It's funny that we would have a different physical, response, somatic response to the concept of time dividing and our location within it.
Yeah, I'm with Abigail. I'm sort of falling. I'm sort of falling one way or I'm falling the other way, and it feels like a slippage, sort of a dangerous, not dangerous, but there's a tension there, the possibility.
It's like existing.
I think it's
rupture.
yeah, it's the movement, isn't it, that image creates is endless. It's in constant. So yeah, whether it's up or down, it's just it just brings this incredible sense of motion in what it's, you know, like you said, we're always in search of this stillness. Yeah, actually, being in the moment is, from that description, is totally the opposite.
It's being hurtled from moment to moment.
Yeah, literally.
I was struck by the sense that everything's moving. There is no such thing as the present, because we're always becoming into the future and leaving the past. So everything's moving all at once. And it's like the idea of the work of art or a painting or a photograph freezes time or is still, but actually that also must be moving, because everything's moving. So I was kind of trying to work that out, like an artwork that's supposedly just there, still not moving, representing whatever it's representing, but actually we're moving and changing. And where do those two collide?
So we could say the work of art is a collision of those conditions, whatever those conditions are. Because they're always built on paradox or aporia.
Yes.
Yeah, I also feel like it's a collision of both falling and drifting and floating. And where the falling feeling comes from is like you don't have the control to the gravity. And you don't have control to, it's an out of control feeling. And the floating is also similar with that.
There's also something about, you know, the materiality of art, in that it's, you know, when you think about the substance of anything that you create artwork out of, you know, there's a kind of hurtling together of these different materials, but there's also this disintegration that's happening as well, isn't there? So the art isn't a static thing, whatever it's made of, nothing is static. There's this constant movement.
And along with that, if we're traveling through time from moment to moment, then so is the painting and its context and the history from which it was born and the history into which it has yet to be read or has already been read and might be a memory of, according to Rilke. So that sort of inescapable unfolding and refolding gives, I think, multiple points of view, or the freedom to explore from multiple points of view.
And there's also the thing about the what Johnny Golding talks about as sticky cohesion. You know, that you may think that you're reaching out for the object, but the object's reaching out for you before even that moment of that thought, that you're in constant, everything is in constant sticky cohesion.
Your piece in the show, in the window there, did that so well. It reached through the window and grabbed so many people that they were running into the sign. You know, like after they passed us, as they passed the window, they were looking at it. We have this little sandwich board outside, and the piece grabbed
as a trip hazard.
and they were literally like kids crashed their scooters into it. But I think that's the description of what you're talking about, you know, that it got them, and that's interesting.
It's a good way of getting people in, actually, isn't it? Just put up a trip hazard just past the window. That's an amazing compliment.
What about where it falls into or lapses into fiction?
Or the entanglement.
Well, the structure of the presentation itself has bits of fiction in it.
Was that your writing, the fictional bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, no, I
I
really
noticed
enjoyed that.
the Velasquez piece, The Woman with the Glove, that sounded very autobiographical there.
I wondered if that was, what was her name, Jennifer, if she was in there?
No, it was the one that the sitter wasn't identified, but the text that that was being read, it sounded like what Jonathan has said before about that painting.
Yeah.
But it's sort of destabilized as categories.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's that boundary between the real and the imaginary, isn't it? That real and what did you call it? The phantasm. It's a really interesting space to play in. And again, with a lot of tension. It fractures the subject. No, go on.
I was following on that. I think that it destabilizes for a moment also the listener in the seminar, because we're not told who he is. He looked at or he once said, and I think it sort of shifts our positionality as understanding who's speaking to us, or who we should listen to, or we automatically sort of think like, oh, he said this, he must have something to say about it, and we listen from a different perspective. So the seminar becomes a spoken word work at the same time. It sort of opens it.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm probably going to repeat what you just said because my mind was trying to catch up. But yeah, that thing of I just made a note. A painting that trembles, it causes movement or shift, a shuddering that never stops. And in a way, yeah, that shifting between fictional and documentary or reality, whatever. It's interesting. That slipping and sliding. Yeah. Symbolic pregnancy. Love that.
Just thinking about the image in Velasquez's mind before painting, if that impression captures what he tried to, what he motivated him to paint. So
I guess the subject was forgotten because he'd forgotten the subject. The forgetting of the name of the sitter went in hand with him, first of all, forgetting that he was painting a portrait, or not bothered about the portrait he was painting, but got caught up in the glove, sort of elsewhere of the subject.
It is amazing how that painting draws you towards that glove, even if you don't know or understand, what's going on. It literally, you can't help it. Your eye falls towards it. I've never stood in front of it, that painting.
It's in
Do
the
you know
Wallace,
where? Sorry?
in the Wallace collection in London.
We went to see it.
We went to see it. It was one of the
Did
visits.
you? I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't with you, I'm afraid.
Take that visit either. I'll
You
have
know-
to go again.
That bit that said a painting that trembles, I think I read it. And is it possible to read that paragraph again?
because that's great. Yeah.
I loved the play of words. Somewhere in the middle. Okay.
Just a minute.
God, while you're going through it, I just want to be like, slow down, let's just do it again.
I know, I feel the same. I was thinking I've been in this group too long, I think, but for me, this presentation tonight has really hit on what it is when you make just amazing artwork. I think everything in this presentation is bang on what it takes to make something amazing.
Here, here.
I agree. Was it here? No. No. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I could have dealt with this presentation at half the speed. I think I missed a lot of it. My mind just couldn't keep up. There's so much in it. Yeah.
This is it.
I wonder too if it's not worth it at some point when we come across things like this to actually have a reading day or a double reading of it, so that we can catch the thing, because it's only bits of it are sticky.
Yeah, that's right.
Read it again. Someone read it again.
Sometimes the things that serve to attract are strange. Why a whale, or even more extreme, a killer whale? How are such attractions and fascinations formed? A shard of memory, a dream perhaps, or a half-forgotten children's book? Anyway, it is submerged, both the origin and the image. In this way it is both there, but also lurking on the edge of disappearance, as in a glimpse of the eye. In this respect, assuming a relationship to the spectre that patrols the boundary between the real and a phantasm. This is where the threat lies, this patrolling of a dangerous boundary rendered in shades of grey. The grey signifies both the deep and the remote. It is the registration of the indistinct, grey killer whale in passing by, glimpsed killer, a grey killer glimpsed in the half-light on the edge on this world, in the deep of this world, passing from this world. The painting is also fixed, definite, even still, and sorry, I can't see the bottom of it. And yet it trembles on its own edge, a still painting, but a still painting that trembles.
Wow.
I actually researched something about killer whale because I also wanted to paint them. And as I researched, the killer whale is actually not very aggressive to people. And why it like there was a killer whale has been caught to the aquarium, and it killed like maybe several people, but it is just because when the people are threatened to them. And I feel the name of the killer whale with the originality of how the whale is also a kind of entanglement.
I thought that was really interesting, this bit here, shuddering but never stopping, desperate to remember. It's not modernity, but the delicate threads of memory that we have lost within the circularity of contemporary time. And then I think later you go on to talk about what it would be to catch hold of this circularity.
I wonder if that catching hold is the sensation that we're talking about as we kind of find the split there. You know, it's kind of that existence or the hurtling.
Mm.
Because in the painting of that killer whale too, when you're looking at it, we're so connected to symbology, as just said, you know, the idea of the naming of it and of what it means for a fin to break the water, and the fact that we know that it's in motion. So it's like our monkey minds can't help but fill in what's happening in the next instant and what must have happened in the moment before. So the picture can't be still.
There's also the thing that the background, you know, as you drift in and out of looking at that work, you also connect with the line of infinity, don't you? You kind of connect with the mistiness.
Well, and then it just becomes a shape too, just the flat shape, and it's nothing. It's just an abstract shape, and so it comes in and out of sort of being and recognition at the same time. I mean, it could be an airplane.
Be interesting to take phrases and rework the phrases in writing.
That was that last one, that previous, before the one before that one. Oops, no, next one. Other way. Sorry. Yeah, the next one. That one. So that's your writing there, Jonathan. Yeah.
I love the process of inserting your fiction into the art historical narrative within, folding it in as though it's a real event, because it is a real event, because you wrote it and you're a part of art history because you're an artist and history happens. So it's this sort of creating of the real.
And there's also the thing of, how you've gone straight into, this sort of it's really intimate, and yet it's, it's global. It's like you're talking about this, your sort of time, space, kind of folding in like a moment that is, has so much history, and yet nothing. It's interesting. I've just found this really fascinating, this passage. I love the idea that through different temperatures of the breath, or a different pace within the breath, could sum up these different states of the winds across the globe. It's magical.
And also this idea of the fact that in this world, there's an art that you can master called the symbolic winds, which would have these qualities that one could produce, but that it would be a rare thing to be able to understand them and then produce them and then produce that effect in someone. You'd have to be a master of this illusory art of symbolic wind breath communication. It's a whole world in one little slide.
Yeah, it really is.
Maybe the Egyptians had the art of symbolic winds. I was drifting, simply drifting, not knowing which way to face. It was difficult to separate the inside from the outside. So I resolved to explore this space of entangled not knowing. The question starts to jut out. What is the relationship between worlds? The human, non-human, inhuman, post-human, pre-human. So many worlds to overwhelm sense. But what if for a moment we gleam just a fragmentary grasp of such a circulation? What then?
Again, I just love that idea of this trying to grasp something that's moving. Again, it's like the splitting being in the present moment and time splitting. It's got that same kind of feel to it, hasn't it? That there's something circulating.
Well, it's also a bit like trying to grasp the ungraspable.
Mm. Mm. And yet somehow in my mind, it would, if you did grasp it, it would lift you up and take you off and put you somewhere else, and you'd have to let go quite quickly. If you did grasp it, you'd have to let go.
Like the dog that caught the car. What are you going to do now?
Maybe it's better never to grasp it. Then we'll be wondering.
Well, isn't that the definition of philosophy too? Like the pursuit of knowledge? Because once you have knowledge, you enter the realm of science and you've left philosophy. Philosophy is the love of the pursuit, not the actual, I think, right?
Not wisdom, but the love of wisdom.
The love of wisdom.
The love of wisdom rather than wisdom itself.
Yes, there we go. I found that to be so freeing. Like, that meant that I didn't have to understand everything. I could still just love it.
Where do we go next week?
Do you guys want to meet up for dinner? I suggested Friday, 9th of June. I'll go to the Indian that Jonathan suggested once. I think you take your own drinks there. And it's really cheap. It's It's very central. It's in Euston, right?
Near Euston Square.
Yeah, Euston Square, next to very close to the station, I think.
I'll try to come. I'm not sure I can make tonight.
When is it again? 9th of June.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just something I suggested. We can do it another time. We can do it the week after if you want.
Who's that for a meal?
Me.
Yep.
If we do it the week after,
If we do it a week after.
I can come.
I'm afraid I'm not back till the end of June, so I have to count me out, I'm afraid.
Where are you? I hear birds singing.
It's an owl.
Wow.
Yeah.
You look like a Magritte painting.
It's like a filter.
You're light and everything else is night and you're in daylight.
Yeah. The light from the computer. It's quite magical here, and all these sounds coming in and the light changing and talking about entanglement. It seems quite appropriate somehow. It seems very entangled here.
Yeah, everything seems more meaningful. I think that's how I felt in Greece recently. So,
Yes.
do we know when Yon Yi is coming? Because isn't she coming to London in June? Should we not time the dinner around when she's going to be here? Do we know when that is?
Yeah, she said it's the end of June.
Or is it? Okay.
Or sometime in June. Maybe we can ask her through WhatsApp.
Jonathan, do you have speaking of next week, do you have a discussion on intimacies or intensifications? Both of those things were in this.
Not per se. I have one on eroticism, intimacy. I'll just go through my list. So I've got one on objection. We've done the art history, black we've done, Blanchard we've done, blind we've done, color we've done, Tumbly we've done. Diagrams. We haven't done diagrams for some time. That's a very complex presentation. So both on diagrams and diagrammatics.
Might that then lead us on to like a presentation if we
That's
went?
a presentation. And there's also one on dream and memory, which is big. It's quite a sort of substantial one, about 130 slides.
Is that a 2-session sort of talk, maybe?
I think we could do it in one session. So we've got objection, diagrams, dream, and memory.
Maybe memory. I think memory is related to entanglement a lot.
So dream is mainly on dream.
Or maybe dream.
So shall we do it on dream?
What,
Yeah.
you mean for the next session?
Next session.
Oh,
Are you going to record it? The
yeah.
next session? Because I'm away again. But I'd love not to miss that. So if you record it, brilliant.
I know, me too. It's going to be my favorite subject, huh?
Yeah.
So then let's do diagram.
Yeah, please do diagrams.
We do diagrams first and then dreams.
Yeah.
And then we do a writing workshop.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, great.
Great. Yeah.
One of the things which we could use as a template is the possibility of writing on a single artifact, a bit like the killer whale. So going out of the comfort zone and writing free form about a work of art, mixing potentially fiction and rhythm and free up how you normally write about art. So not didactic, not art historical, but creative.
And choosing one for us all to write about, or choosing our own?
Choosing your own, I think, because that way we get a complete, we get taken by surprise, the choices.
Yeah.
What, I want to ask a question. What about the conjunction between Giotto and Matisse? Matisse traveling to Italy and seeing Giotto's Arena Chapel and coming back and painting the Red Room.
Well, actually, it was what I thought was interesting is probably some of you have been to the Matisse Chapel in the south of France, and I thought there were some parallels which I hadn't realized until I saw the image that you just showed on the screen earlier this evening.
That's an interesting triangulation, in fact, isn't it?
I mean, it had never occurred to me before until tonight.
What does the chapel look like?
I'll put a link in the chat here in a second. I mean,
The Arena Chapel, or the one in Padua, or the Matisse.
Matisse is
oh, it's beautiful.
Chapel. I presume he was inspired by Giotto.
It never left him. So it's up there.
I was struck by the blue. I mean, obviously it's just on a computer screen, but can you get that kind of lapis blue now? Is it? I mean, it's an incredibly intense pigment he got.
It was from Afghanistan. It's ground from stone. So originally it costs. It came through Venice, so it was more valuable than gold.
Wow.
I mean, it's one of the most valuable substances in the earth at that time. It was mined in Afghanistan, traveled through Constantinople and came to Venice. And when they paid for paintings, when they did commission for paintings, they worked out the cost of the lapis and the gold leaf and charged separately the gold leaf and lapis. So it would cost an absolute fortune. It was advertising the fact that this was the most expensive painting yet undertaken in Italy.
Well, if you're going to present something to God in order to overcome the sin of lending money, it better be gilded in lapis, I guess.
Yeah. And the first artist to use blue in a pagan context or a secular context was Titian in his painting of Bacchus and Ariadne. Before that blue is reserved for Christ or the Virgin Mary. It has such strong religious connotations.
Do they limit the amount of time you can visit because of the deterioration of it, or because of just the pure numbers?
Oh, they limit the number of visitors, so they control the number of visitors, but literally there's enough visitors. You have to book in advance and you can only get 20 minutes. So it's not enough I mean, you get to see the cathedral in Assisi, of Francis of Assisi, is much better place to see Giotto's paintings.
Controlling time.
Oh, sorry.
Also, I was just thinking that the way of controlling time is a way of adding value to the lapis lazuli as well, isn't it? To make a parallel with the access to the material in the experience.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at
I was just thinking about your question to do with Matisse and Giotto, and those two. Because when you put the red painting up by Matisse, it looked incredibly flat. I don't know if that's where it was photographed, but and the chapel was just, it had depth and space. So I was struck by that difference, I guess. And also, I mean, again, it's just a representation of a painting, but the red didn't kind of. It's a great red, but it wasn't like the blue. But I don't know if that's just the way it came out in the
got the idea of changing the figure-ground relationship, saturating a color. So it's
yes,
more
sure.
about painting.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's other influences, the big paintings, the dance and the musicians, which are vast paintings, which are, I mean, overwhelmingly colorist. And they interesting enough, went to Russia before the revolution. I think it went in about 1913 or 1915, and were lost to modernism. Were locked away in the Leningrad Museum. And so two of the most important paintings of early modernism were locked away from modernity as an influence, whereas Picasso's Le Damoiselle had much better exposure. So the exposure of those two paintings might have had a different outcome for the history of painting in modernism if they'd have been, let's say, in the West, or like in New York or in London or in Paris. One of those freaks of art history. But I think the time apart is what's unusual. It's been influenced by something. So, I mean, really early Renaissance, really the first move towards the Renaissance and the first move towards full modernist painting. So the two moments kind of joined together by this visit that Matisse undertook, and a sort of commentary upon that visit, an aesthetic commentary. I mean, normally we don't have such big leaps in time, but I think we're going to get these leaps in time in the next cultural phase.
Because we have sort of unfettered access to all of the material that's gone before.
Not just because of AI and memory, but because of imagination and a reconnection with a different sort of memory.
I think too, art history, the Western canon is being picked apart and revisited and reconstructed by so many different people all at once that it's a little bit scattered. There's been this rupture in the canon, and so there is this. It's permeable now, which means that it's easier for artists, I think, to have permission, to give themselves permission to dive in, look, respond, recontextualize. I think it's happening a lot more.
I mean, the Mondrian and Hildenhoff Klimt exhibition would never have happened 10 years ago. Impossible. So that's a reinvention of space of modernity. I mean, she was an unknown figure for 40, 50 years, yet preceded Kandinsky and Mondrian in terms of abstraction. Shall we leave it there? Any last point? The exhibition at Lychee is on the 28th, 29th, and 30th of January. I'll next week discuss what I propose.
January next year.
No, June.
Oh, June. Okay.
So I have to watch my slip of. I'd be very unfortunate.
Cool.
Time.
Oh yeah, did you want us to send work, or are you going to talk to us about it?
I'll talk. I've been talking to one or two already, but I've got a kind of a mixed schema for the exhibition. But there'll be 3 phases of it. There's performance and readings, probably on the 30th. a created show, a wall work, which will be, I want someone to create the wall with everyone invited to attend, a drawing wall. So I'll write out a proposal next week and send it to you all. But I'm doing a created show. I'm thinning it down, so it's not just a big group show. It's a created show with a created wall with everyone invited to participate. So either doing a performance or a reading, and perhaps a drawing. But I was thinking that, there's a step up the level. We need to work together in threes and fours to make propositions to do shows and look for spaces and work in combinations of probably new forms of writing with shows and new ways of exhibiting. Okay, next week. So it's
Diagrams.
Diagrams. Have you got it? It's on the there's a link to it.
It's on the website already.
But it deals with, I mean, it's timely in that some of it deals with the Hilda af Klint, the Swedish artist. There's quite a lot of work of hers in it. Also, not this week because I'm busy, but next week I'll organize a couple of visits.
That'd be great.
Okay, until next week.
Okay.
See you in a couple of weeks.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks very much, Jonathan.
Okay.